All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our preview and prediction for the Colorado Buffaloes versus the Oregon Ducks. 21-point line in favor of Oregon. 71 is the total. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC, live from Eugene, Oregon, looking at this Colorado offense. And Nick, before we get into the X's and O's here, kind of just want to get your thoughts on this team. You know, after the upset win over TCU Week 1, we said that this team has a bit of an ego problem with some of the things that Deion Sanders and his players are saying, and it's only escalated. Shedeur Sanders, phenomenal player in the Heisman race currently. He's at the forefront of it, though. You know, he was trying to poke the eyes out of a player on CSU. Before that game, he was at the front of a scrimmage between players. Before Nebraska game, he's over here showing off his watch and whatnot. Xavier Weaver during the CSU game scores, instantly turns around, starts talking to the DB. Travis Hunter, of course, landed that massive hit by a CSU safety. He's out for a couple of weeks now. Incredibly dirty hit. Probably should have been an ejection, maybe even a suspension from that player. But this is a team that seems to have an ego and a disrespect problem that's encouraged by their head coach, Nick. And I ask you, is it fair to complain when you're played that way, when you act like this?
Yeah, I think Colorado has a bit too big of an ego for where they are. You know, the fans don't really know what to do in this situation. They haven't had any success the last 20 years. This team comes out and they're 3-0, and they're talking a lot of trash. You know, Deion Sanders is certainly pushing that narrative. I think Barstool is to blame certainly for it as well. I'm gonna throw the blame at them as well with the way they're pushing this narrative. And when you talk like that, you're going to get hit, and there's going to be some consequences. The Colorado State hit, I thought it was a dirty hit, certainly, right? But I don't think it warranted the attention it's receiving. I think if any other player, any other team made that hit, it might get a few looks on social media, but it's getting blown up because of it being on a Colorado player and on Travis Hunter specifically. For that player to be receiving death threats, it's just unacceptable behavior from Colorado fans and from the nation as large as college football fans. You can't be sending death threats to a player. Yeah, the hit was late and all that, but the ego stuff, the whole Shedeur Sanders with the watch and Deion talking about, better have the cameras on me when I shake his hand at the end of the game. It's all just too much. This team has only won 3 games. They were atrocious the last 20 years. They've come in here with this attitude that I just do not like. If they go out and beat Oregon, yeah, you can start talking, but they haven't played any opposition, in my opinion, that you would consider a serious opponent. They play a top 25 team on the road this weekend. If you win this game, you can start talking a little bit more. I don't like it personally. I think it's just not great for the game in general, and they just talk a little too much smack, in my opinion.
Sanders has put this team on his back. 78% completion rate, 1,251 yards. That's an average of 417 a game, 10 touchdowns and a pick. He's been phenomenal for them. He's going to have one less weapon than Travis Hunter, Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn. These guys we knew were going to be high usage players coming into the season. They certainly have not disappointed. 386 and a pair of scores for Weaver, 2 more for Horn, along with 247 yards. Dylan Edwards, a running back. They don't really have much of a running game. He's certainly going to be leaned on as a pass-catching threat. And then Michael Harrison really stepped up in that second half. You wondered who would kind of fill that void left by Hunter. He was able to do so against Colorado State, kind of introducing himself here. 7 grabs, 76 yards, and 2 touchdowns, one being the game winner as well. The run game, though, and this offensive line has been flat-out poor. 61 yards per game on the ground. The offensive line, they allow an immense amount of penetration so far this season. Van Wells, their best player at center, was out last game. Believe he'll be back for this one. If not, then they're certainly not going to be any easier. But Shedeur, he's able to make a lot of plays with his legs, and I think you're going to look to see them do more runs with his legs, where they're incorporated, more QB runs called. I think that's one thing they really have to do to try to eat up clock here and try to find some balance, because the run game's been flat out non-existent, pretty embarrassing level, I'd say. And again, the offensive line, they just allow a lot. The Nebraska D-line, it's nothing special by any means. They were just eating them up in that contest a couple weeks ago. So, Shedeur, he's going to have to be big time in this game. He's going to have to continue to be focused and take care of the ball, though, Nick.
61 yards per game on the ground is unacceptable, right? The rushing total for this team is not good, and it needs to be improved upon. Yes, they can throw the ball. Yes, they can air it out. But when you have no pulse on the offense on the ground, it really does put you in a bad situation, because your defense is on the field with more time left in the game. Running the ball does kill clock, and it certainly helps you out. They've had 0 success in that. Dylan Edwards is better pass catcher than he is on the ground. He has more yards receiving than he does rushing. He also has 3 receiving touchdowns compared to 1 rushing touchdown. The receiving game is great, though. Shedeur Sanders obviously is having a great season, 78.7% completion percentage, 1,251 yards, 10 scores, 1 interception. He looks comfortable. He looks like he is primed for the big time here. He is really having a great season. We worried about his jump from Jackson State to the FBS level. It has worked out perfectly for him. He's looked great under center. Very good, confident quarterback. Needs to use his legs a little bit more. I agree with you there. I think that is a good balance for them. Xavier Weaver, I had him as my breakout player in the conference. Certainly living up to that hype so far. 386 and 2 scores for him. Jimmy Horn, 247, 2 scores, Both those guys look very good. Michael Harrison, the tight end, big, nice tight end, stepped up at the end there. He looked just open on every single play in overtime against Colorado State. He couldn't even believe it how open he was. He scored one of those touchdowns. He just kind of shrugged his shoulders and was stunned that he was that open. He's making good space for himself. He's a good physical tight end. I like to see Harrison be involved more here. I think he's a very talented player. Losing Hunter is a huge blow. Can they step up and find the pieces to make that work?
You look at the Oregon offense, Bo Nix, he has a great grasp of the system. He's absolutely thriving. And this year, they've certainly been running up the scoreboard. What they did in week 1, they put up 81 on the scoreboard, 55 against Hawaii. They could have added a lot more if they wanted to. Bo Nix, 893 yards through the air, 8 touchdowns. They've been keeping him very limited on the ground, though. He did have 9 carries against Texas Tech, but only 2 in the other 2 contests, so they're certainly looking to keep him healthy. And this is a game I don't think they're going to need to run him a whole lot. And they have a nice trio of runners in the backfield, led by Bucky Irving, very physical specimen at 216 yards and 3 scores. 5 touchdowns for Jordan James. Noah Whittington got back at it last week. He's also got 100+. So this is a vertical run game that certainly puts a lot of opponents on their heels. They like to go fast, and they do it behind a strong, sturdy offensive line. Jackson Powers-Johnson at center. He's been great for them. Josh Connerly, Johnny Cornelius, some younger guys at tackle. Cornelius, of course, the Rhode Island transfer. And Stephen Jones and Marcus Harper. They've been struggled at times at guard, but I don't think this is a weakness that's going to be exploited by Colorado. I think this offensive line, they're going to be extremely built, and their power and the success is certainly going to be on the ground in this game, which is going to open things up in this passing game where they have a lot of weapons, Nick.
I think Bo Nix is having a great season. There's always that joke, the Heisman joke. I think it's real at this point. Bo Nix is a Heisman contender right now. He's having a great season, 77.6% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns, 893 yards so far. I know they played pretty limited opposition. Bucky Irving's looked great on the ground. They really trying to set him loose, 8 yards per carry, 216 yards on the ground for him, 3 scores as well. He's got 12 receptions as well for about 100 yards. So he's involved in the passing game as well. Jordan James, Noah Whittingham are also involved. Bo Nix, he haven't really unleashed his whole legs yet, but he can certainly be involved at some point. He has potential to break out there. Wide receiver room has some nice talent. Troy Franklin has almost 300 yards receiving and 3 scores. Gary Bryant, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, these are all bit part pieces who are stepping up and being involved. Holden, coming over from Alabama, he has 100 receiving yards and 2 scores. This offense is really clicking right now. They look good on the offensive line. All the pieces there that they brought in from the portal, including Cornelius from Rhode Island, looks good. He fit in there perfectly at right tackle. The rest of this offensive line, we worried they might be a bit shaky. They're a little bit younger than other units, but they're having a great season so far. They're keeping Bo Nix upright. He looks comfortable. He looks healthy. He's in a really good spot right now. This Oregon offense is a very solid unit. They put up a ton of points, I know, against poor opposition, but overall, very talented unit that is very versatile and thriving at this point.
This is a deep receiving room as well. Troy Franklin, Gary Bryant has really stepped up as a second league pass catcher after coming over from USC. Tez Johnson from Troy, he's got 155 yards. And Trayshawn Holden, he's got 102 on just 7 grabs. These guys all have 2+ touchdowns, so they're certainly spreading the wealth a good bit. Bucky Irving, they'll throw it to him on occasion. Then Terrence Ferguson, he's got to get going this year. Colorado, they really struggle in zone coverage. They give up a lot of free space, and that's exactly where Oregon thrives. They have the speed and the athleticism here that can really expose, big open space, and then they can take that ball and they can add on all kinds of yardage after that, Nick. I think this is a bad matchup for Colorado potentially. We'll talk about their defense here in a second, but I think Oregon's going to look to exploit that. On occasion, they're really going to have this defense off balance, I'd say. Dan Lanning, he's well aware of the struggles on that side of the ball for them, and he definitely has the versatility that can expose them in more ways than one.
He certainly has a nice versatile offense that can expose this defense that has looked shaky at times for Colorado. I think they're going to hit them in multiple different ways, find a good balance of on the ground and through the air. I think Bo Nix will be able to kind of quarterback this offense in a very good position and lead this offense to a very good game against this Colorado defense.
Yeah, and looking at the Buffalo's defense, I figured coming into the season, they'd probably be worse than they were last year, where they gave up 45 points per game just because of all the turnover. It's hard to build that chemistry on defense that fast. And the defensive line's going to face the toughest they've seen all year long. They had 0 tackles for loss against TCU. They've been able to find 15 over the last 2 games, 9 against CSU, 6 against Nebraska. But at the same time, these are pretty poor opponents also. Nebraska, the game plan they went with for some reason was just to line up in the I formation and try to run against the stacked box. And when you have one of the nation's worst offensive lines, that's certainly not going to work. And they still gave up 222 rushing to them. So the run defense is definitely a problem. They're very weak in the trenches. They do have some good players, though. Jordan Dominic, he's been unleashed, 4.5 TFL over the last 2 games. Taja Olston, the West Virginia transfer, he's been, a guy that's certainly stepping up and producing a lot for them. Juwan Mitchell, he was a former Texas transfer. And then Marvin Hams really stepped up at his inside linebacking position. How do you think this front seven is going to match up here against the Oregon front that's incredibly strong, a backfield that's very versatile? And Bo Nix, even if they don't get him involved, I think they certainly are going to look to stay with these backs through the middle to try and continue to wear down this bad front.
I think this front seven is going to struggle. Guys like Marvin Ham have been good for this defense. Juwan Mitchell as well. They're leading this defense. Ham has 20 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a sack. Juwan Mitchell, 18 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss for him. So those are your big leaders there on this front part of this defense. The linebacking core has been good with Ham and Mitchell, but I think the defensive line is really struggling. Alston, Cokes, Payne Jr., Dominic are all players who have really not fully lived up to the expectations so far. Jordan Dominic's leading the way with that, with 12 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, plus the sack for him. But Taj Alston, 8 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and sack in each. He's got to step up there. Those are numbers you really need to see more. Shane Cokes, 6 total tackles. These guys just have not lived up to the expectations yet. They're really struggling on the defensive line. They're getting bullied by subpar offensive lines, and it really is a problem when you place against a unit like Oregon that is really talented in the trenches, that has a very good, big offensive line that seems to be working really well together.
They did do a pretty good job week 2 against Nebraska of shooting gaps. They're certainly very aggressive in doing so. They have to be calculated when doing that against Oregon, though, because if you miss one gap, that could be bad news bears for your defense. I think looking at this Buffs secondary, they want to play man coverage. At least that was going to be the story before Hunter got hurt. Him and Amari and Cooper, those guys, they certainly feel confident being able to lock them up on the outside. Plenty of space was still available, though, against TCU, for example. And that's going to be the same thing against Colorado State, where, this team just gets burned underneath in the intermediate range. And I think, improvements, we're wondering how many will be shown. With no Hunter, though, it's really going to be hard to gauge what we're going to see in this game. They've done a good job of snagging picks, though. Cameron Selman Craig has 2. Trevor Woods, a great player, has 2 of them. Shiloh Sanders had a pick 6 against CSU. 6 total picks for Colorado, so the secondary is certainly making some plays. But, it's kind of expected when these teams are throwing as much as they are against them. 112 attempts by opposition so far through 3 games. Just underneath Nick, playing zone, it's going to be really hard to contain this Oregon defense. But, they have to be strong and sturdy. It's really hard, because I understand how many improvements can be made from a week-to-week basis, but looking at this defense, it's going to be incredibly difficult to slow these boys down. Unless they can be strong against the run, then they might have a shot.
It is going to be tough for the secondary. I think they have to be strong against the run. Can't get bullied by Oregon on the ground. That's the only way they're going to have success in this game. The secondary has been the best part of this defense. Guys like Trevor Woods, he was the only returning player on this defense. And we highlighted him in the offseason saying, Woods fought for his spot on this team, and it's paid out well for Woods. He got that pick to seal the game against Colorado State, 17 total tackles, 2 interceptions for him, plus a pass breakup. I love Trevor Woods. I'm rooting for him on this team because he's playing really strong and playing good football. He didn't let his job get taken away from him. Solomon Craig as well. He's having a good season with the 12 total tackles, 2 picks. So they're certainly getting a lot of picks, like you said. Shiloh Sanders, 19 total tackles, second leading tackler on the team. I need to see a big game out of him. I need to see a big game out of Woods. They're going to have to try and contain this Oregon offense, that has so much potential to hit you in different ways. They have so many ways they can spread the ball out. I think they're going to be spread thin here. Colorado's got to find a way to step up and make this happen.
Speaking of that Oregon defense, the production drought last year was a big topic for them, and it's sort of, extended here into 2023. So I'm interested to see what we're going to see against this bad offensive line. Popo Amavi, Jordan Burch, these are some guys for them that are really going to be looked upon to step up. Casey Rogers, a veteran. I think these guys are all going to eat in this game, but they have to have, gap integrity. They really got torn up by Tyler Shaw and his legs against Texas Tech. He had 100-plus rushing, and that's really where all their success for the Red Raiders came from on the ground, was the design QB runs. And that's why I say Shadur Sanders, they need to look to incorporate that into their game plan, because that's going to be a good way to really put this defense on their heels and give you a shot to potentially outscore these boys in Eugene. But the lack of production so far, they haven't really played tough opponents, but they certainly didn't really step up against Texas Tech. And we still talked about how there were some things this defense had to figure out, like the linebacking core. Jeffrey Bassa, Bryce Bottinger, he stepped up as the 3rd leading tackler for this team. Connor Schul, a transfer. Jamal Hill, another converted DB down to linebacker. So there's a lot of things going on with this middle of this defense, Nick, but they're facing a one-dimensional offense. I expect these guys to be, 5 to 8 yards off the ball at all times in this contest.
Yeah, I think this is a secondary front seven that needs to step up here against this Colorado offense that has shown some weakness on the ground. These are some guys, you need to see more tackling out of some of these players. I think it's disappointing that this front line, Popo Mavi has 6 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He's one of the leaders there on the front seven. He needs to step up and find a way to get more tackles. They need to get past these offensive line. This is an offensive line that has some issues for Colorado. I think this Oregon defense can really pick that apart. 5 total tackles for Jordan Burch, two tackles for loss and a sack for him, but he's down the depth chart there in terms of tackles. So this is a unit that has some nice talented pieces. Casey Rogers, another guy that I'm looking at. I need to see more out of him. I've really not seen enough. He has 5 total tackles this season. These guys just have not been able to produce the numbers you want to see on this front seven. It's really coming from the secondary and the linebacking core, and it's certainly concerning for this front defensive line.
And it still is early, but this was a theme last year, so it's certainly a concern worth pointing out. The secondary, though, Kyrie Jackson, Tareem Johnson, Tysheem Johnson, that is. Some of these transfers coming over that made a big impact. Evan Williams as well. This is a revamped safety group. Very happy with how they performed this year, along with the veteran returnee transfer of Nico Reed at nickel. Dante Manning has stepped up to that other cornerback position. Trequez Bridges hasn't been on the field as much. So these guys are certainly out here competing in the secondary. Bridges was really good last year. Brian Addison as well. These guys are losing playing time. Some of these transfers. So I'm very happy with this secondary they have. I think they're going to continue to get better throughout the year. They're certainly going to have to play very good in this game. Colorado's going to throw the ball a lot. What's the game plan going to be, Nick? I think they're going to allow a lot of yardage because I think they're going to look to keep everything in front of them as Colorado. Obviously, they're going to have to air it out a lot because the running game, they just can't lean on it so far. That's been proven so far this year. So I think at the end of the day in the box score, you'll see a lot. Like you did against Texas Tech, where they allowed 282 yards against an air raid offense. That's pretty respectable. That's very good. Also had 3 interceptions. 2 of them were very crucial as well. So what's the game plan going to be? Are they going to look to do the same thing they did against Tech?
I think that is going to be a similar game plan. I think that's a good idea to kind of keep the game in front of them. 280 against Tech is a pretty respectable number for the Red Raiders and a respectable number for this defense in general. I think that's both of those things can be true. I like the secondary. Some of these guys have definitely stepped up. I think they are some talented. Tysheem Johnson, 20 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack for him. He's been kind of the leader there in terms of tackles and been the leader in this defense in that position there at cornerback, or free safety. And Kyrie Jackson's been playing well at cornerback as well. He's having a decent season. So I think this defense is a good unit. Kyrie Jackson has 10 total tackles and 2 picks. They have to keep the game in front of them, right? Limit the big plays, try to control the line of scrimmage, and also control this run game, which has looked anemic at times. Can they continue to shut down this Colorado run offense that really does not exist? If Colorado struggles on the run and they can keep in front of them as well and play better coverage in the secondary, I think this Oregon team can win this game by a whole lot, and this defense will be able to control and limit this Colorado offense that's been really good so far this season.
Tail of the tape, the team comparisons. I don't think there's a valid argument that can be made to have anything other than Oregon getting the nod at every single positional group, quarterback and wide receiver for most games this year. For Colorado would certainly be something you can give them to. And so far, in the 2 games we previewed of Colorado this year, they have gotten the nod at those 2 positions. But here against the Ducks, these rosters are completely different. I don't think, again, Nick, Colorado has a shot when it comes to any of these. Shitter Sanders, he has been great, but he is not Bo Nix at this moment in time. Maybe that's the only argument you could really make, but it's probably not going to be a great one.
I think you could give it maybe to the wide receiver. I think the wide receiving room for Colorado has been really good this year. I think they've lived up to expectations early on, but you are battling against a veteran wide receiving room for this Oregon Ducks team. I don't know, Jimmy Horn, Xavier Weaver, I think you can maybe give the nod there, but outside of that, I think this is going to be an Oregon domination. I think this Oregon team is just more well put together. Dan Lanning has built his team and has his team more together. I think this is a team that's really good on paper.
Looking at the final thoughts in the prediction, the keys to the game, the defensive line really needs to bring the heat for Colorado. They need to stall out this Ducks offense on numerous occasions. For Oregon, they want to keep Colorado off balance, wear them down, should be able to get home with their front 4 as well. The Buffaloes, they want to shoot out, Nick, or do they?
I think they do want to shoot. I think that's the only way they're going to win this game is they just put up a ton of points. I think they're going to have to score a lot of points if they're going to win this game in Eugene. I think a defensive battle is not going to go the way for Colorado. I think they're just going to find a way to fold there late in the game. They're going to have to put up a ton of points here. I think that's the only way they're going to be competitive because Oregon's going to score a lot of points. We know Oregon's going to pick this defense apart. You and I both have Oregon scoring a significant amount of points. I think it's certainly possible they put up more than that than what I said.
Yeah, 62-28 for me in favor of Oregon. Dan Lanning, he's shown in the past 2 years, he doesn't care to run up the score. He's aware of kind of this disrespect and the ego this Colorado team has been putting together recently. Deion Sanders recently came out a couple days ago, said he was a better coach than Nick Saban. Dan Lanning worked under Nick Saban. I'm sure he's not going to take that one too lightly. He's going to look to prove a point in this one. I just think that the factors like that, he's going to look for a beatdown in this one. I wouldn't even be shocked if they put up triple digits. I think he's going to look to really make a complete statement in this one. And I think Dan Lanning, he's not going to let go of anything in this one. He also had some talk of his own in the preseason where he said, I don't remember Colorado ever winning anything. So certainly he's aware of these boys, and I think he wants to run up the score to prove a point.
I think I want a more conservative score, 45-27, with Colorado covering the spread. But I'm not touching this game at all. There's no reason to bet on this game unless you want to bet the over, which is 71, which is a little crazy to think about. But I certainly think you could throw the over there and get a play on that. I don't want to touch the spread this week. I think this is just a dangerous game to kind of look at here. 21 is a lot of points, but also then again, Oregon is a really good team. So I'm not going to touch the spread this week. I think that I'm just going to avoid that. I'm going to go with conservative score, 45-27. I think Oregon wins this game. I think Oregon has too much talent here at home. It's going to be rocking Eugene. They want to win this game. You know, I'm sure Ducks fans are not happy with Colorado. I'm sure a lot of Pac-12 fans are not happy with the antics that Colorado's put on and sort of how they've shown up here and have this whole national spotlight. When teams like Oregon, you know, arguably deserve more of a national spotlight considering how good and well-rounded they are, and they're not getting the love out there in Eugene. This is a very good Oregon team that's really getting disrespected, in my opinion, not getting enough coverage in the national media. If they win this game by, you know, 20, 30 points, they'll get the respect they deserve, in my opinion, and that's certainly something that's warranted for Dan Lanning and co.
That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this one.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Jesus.